Thank you, Jess. That was a whole word in and of itself. um, you went deep. I forgot about all that stuff about me that's on the internet. That's good to know. um, all right. Good morning, everyone. You take a minute and pray with me, please. Gracious and loving Spirit of life, I thank you for these words and this message that you've put on my heart to deliver this morning. I just ask that it help me get out of my own way in its delivery, and may it touch the hearts of someone that's gathered here in this Zoom room. Blessed be. Well, I am truly honored and humbled to be speaking to you all again this morning. As it says in my bio, which Jess alluded to, I consider myself a bridge person, a connection between two faiths. While writing this sermon, I came to see that I'm actually a person at the center of the crossroads where paths meet and intersect, and that this is where this sermon takes place. In my first sermon, way back in December, pre-COVID times, remember that? I spoke solely about Christian themes, referring only to the Bible. And in my second sermon, I didn't mention either of these and instead shared some of my earth-based spiritual practices with you all. Today, I hope to bring these paths together to show where and how they intersect and what the view looks like from where I stand in the middle. So if you would, go ahead and close your eyes if you feel comfortable, and imagine yourself standing in the middle of an intersection. Look around. If this intersection represented your whole life, what or who is on the corners? What parts of your life seem to stand in opposition to each other? Do you feel more compelled or repelled by one side of the street? Which corner feels safest? How is your view from standing this intersection unique? Is there anyone else standing there with you? Okay, now you can look both ways and safely exit this intersection and open your eyes. All over the world, many folk traditions and indigenous religions regard the crossroads as a spiritually charged place, a liminal space where it is easier for spirits to enter into and depart from the physical realm to the spiritual realm. People understood that there was power in transitions, the in-between spaces and times, when day bleeds into night, seasons change, and where two roads come together and for a moment become one. Up until the 1840s in England, people were often executed at the crossroads because they believed it would be easier for that spirit to move on and not stick around and haunt its executioners. Also, people who took their own lives were buried at the crossroads in the hopes that when their soul left their body, it would be confused about which way to go and therefore have no choice but to depart. Those who practiced witchcraft and magic knew that the crossroads was a spiritually charged and powerful location where it was easier to access and work with the divine to enact change. We have a saying in my tradition that what happens between the worlds changes all the worlds, meaning that whatever is done in sacred space can affect change at all levels: personal, political, spiritual. And this is why doing magic has been a threat to those in power who want to maintain control over this world. The power that becomes available when our wills align with divine will is greater than any power than a CEO or tyrant holds. Now I'm going to talk about something that you all might be a little more familiar with, the cross. If I were preaching in the sanctuary right now, I would invite you all to look at the big golden cross behind me. Can you picture it? When you picture the cross in general, do you see Jesus's body on it? Why or why not? I'll be honest, it has made me uncomfortable in the past to see Jesus limp and bleeding on the cross, and I preferred the neat, shiny, death-free version. I'm curious about the sanitization of the cross as a symbol. What do we lose in that? The cross was a symbol of crucifixion, of execution by the state. It was meant to intimidate and uphold imperial power while serving as a reminder for the price of transgression. When we don't see Jesus's body on the cross, it's easy to forget that roughly at the center of the cross would have been his heart. Jesus himself was an embodiment of the crossroads, an intersection between the divine and physical worlds. And this is one reason why his existence was such a threat. We all know what happened after he lost his physical form, something so magical and transgressive that it changed all the worlds. In his resurrection, Jesus taught us that death is not where the path of life ends. There is a third road. And so the meaning of the cross changed from a symbol of execution to a symbol of resurrection, transformation, hope, and possibility. Just as the crossroads were a site of execution and death feared by many, those who understood its power appropriated it as a site of divine union and transformation. This is where the cross and the crossroads themselves intersect as symbols of divine power and possibility for radical transformation, reminders that there's always a third road. So now, what does this passage from Jeremiah have to do with all of this? I picked it because it's one of the passages in the Bible that mentions the crossroads explicitly. And really, it is its own word about this moment we are living through right now in the disunited states of Americovid. I saw a picture on the internet of a man on an airplane wearing a red hat, you know the one, and a face mask over his eyes as a sleeping mask with his mouth and nose exposed. I started to point a finger and say, "This is why we are doomed." But then my eye started itching, and when I went to rub it, I discovered that there was a beam in it. Yes, I am also this man. I have stood at the crossing and heard the Eternal One tell me which way to go, and I have said, "No, I'm not going to do it." I have heard the trumpets blaring, and instead I put in my headphones and looked down at my screen instead. American culture rewards willfulness and individuality while demanding obedience to the systems of oppression that maintain it. White supremacy, capitalism, cis-heteropatriarchy, and Christian hegemony. When the Eternal One beckons us to consider the ancient path, it is probably not the smooth paved path with trail markers, trash cans, restrooms, etc. No, it's so ancient and overgrown, we probably don't even notice it. No, we don't even want to acknowledge it because it is not convenient. There is no GPS on this path or cell service, but our ancestors know the way. Amazon doesn't deliver on this path, but maybe Amazon doesn't have what we really need. It is craggy and steep, and we must walk slowly, paying attention to our surroundings. Though this path may make our bodies weary, the Eternal One says, "You will find rest for your souls." I don't know about you all, but my soul wants rest. This passage also gets at an additional significance of the crossroads, making a decision to continue down the same path, to take a new road, or turn back the way you came. Standing in this uncertainty about which path to take is another reason why the center of the crossroads is a spiritual location. Because if we are willing to stand in that discomfort and that uncertainty, we can seek divine guidance about how to make this decision and what is the best path forward. And sometimes the decision is to just stay in the center, which leads me to my own testimony. I started coming to First Congo in July of 2016, and I remember so vividly, it was a new moon in Cancer that day, and the first thing I noticed was that most of the people in the congregation were wearing pink, which is a color that I associate with the sign of Cancer. And I was wearing, I remember it was like a red and white plaid shirt. And I was like, oh, red and white is pink. And I'm like tuned in as well. I remember thinking, wow, this community is really tuned in to each other and the same vibes that I'm tuned into, and they probably don't even know it. At that time, I was seeking, trying to find my spiritual path and home, and something in that service that day resonated deep within me, so I kept coming back. In November of 2017, I took my first magic class, and even though I had never done ritual like that before, I immediately felt at home and like my life finally made sense. And so I continued learning and immersing myself in this new spiritual tradition and continuing to go to church, oftentimes both on the same day. I would call them my Super Soul Sundays. Eventually, though, I began to feel this internal pressure, like I had to choose between going to church and being a witch, even though I saw people in both communities who did both. I was at a self-imposed crossroads. When my ex, who actually identified as a Christian, decided to stop attending FCCO, and shortly thereafter decided to leave me because I wasn't a Christian, I faced this crossroads again, and I decided to keep coming back, and I'm so glad that I did. This community held me as that relationship and my life fell apart. You all helped put me back together again. And for that, I will forever be grateful to my First Congo family. I love you all. Coming through that situation showed me that spirit and love don't care what path you are on. And I committed to being a church-going witch and invited Jesus into my magical practice. I now see that the crossroads that I imposed on myself was a result of internalized binary thinking, that you are either this or that with no room in between. Even as a trans and queer person, I still fall into this trap of binary thinking that is designed to separate and exclude us from each other. There's always a third road. The longer I stand at this intersection between Christianity and paganism, the more synchronicities I notice. For example, on Pentecost last month, we worshiped and read scripture about tongues of fire while the world was on fire in protest of George Floyd's murder. That same night, I attended a ritual for Hestia, the goddess of the hearth, which is the fire in the home. The ritual started with a video of someone cleaning out the ashes from her fire pit. And after I invoked the element of fire, I realized that it was still Pentecost. And here I was honoring the sacredness of fire in a totally different way. I don't know if anyone else in the ritual knew it was Pentecost, but I felt myself standing at this intersection in awe and wonder at the way that Spirit moves through and connects all of us, even if we may not be aware of it. So now I embrace this as my calling to hold the center and bear witness to the intersecting and overlapping manifestations of the divine. As I mentioned earlier, I used to see myself as a bridge. But when you are on a bridge, you are in neither location and eventually must choose a side. Now, I take refuge at the crossroads, the intersection where all paths are one, finding comfort and strength in choosing both and. I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen,
Wow,
Andy.
yay.
Thank
Amen.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Andy.
so much.
Andy.
That's
Amen.
so amazing.
So
Thank
beautiful,
you,
Andy.
Andy. So much love.
Thank you, Andy, for that invitation to be at the Crossroads.
Thank you, Andy.